Surrounded by mountains, we see Kakariko Village, a rural place recognizable by the chickens, paranoia inhabitants, and of course their vernacular architecture. But how do we get to this bootleg version of a rural Japanese village, you may ask? Let me explain. The way to Kakariko resembles the average Chinese road junction. There are too many options and some will take more time than the other. First of all, I wanted to get the map data stored in this beautiful tower, so navigating in this area becomes a bit more manageable. I don't want to admit the bokoblins were trouble, but then I would be lying. So after pinpointing the next destination, I went on my way, discovering many things like... Okay, let's forget we've ever seen that. Time to go to Kakariko Village. Being placed in the province Nekluda, the inhabitants of Kakariko live a quiet and rustic life. They are the first survivors you see after wandering through a world marked with destruction. Because of that, this village shows the struggle of mankind shown in the loss of stamina you experience when going through this forsaken terrain. And the various tombstones of course, but that's something for later. The first thing one experiences is a village that strikes a balance between simplicity and elegance. The buildings are predominantly single-story wooden structures, except the big one right there. With the gabled roofs that are gently sloped and curved, we see a clear visual identity and vision. The inhabitants of Kakariko Village are the Shikai, yes, just like the ones that built all of the shrines and towers. But in the architecture we don't see the glowing patterns and long kills of clay we are used to. We see a different kind of architecture, more focused on its climate and location. The material choices are dictated by the village's natural surroundings, favoring timber and stone. Materials that are readily available and easy to work with. The thatched roofs highlight the form of the buildings, resulting in a place that looks very cozy and welcoming. It shouldn't be a surprise when I say that the architecture of this village is heavily inspired by the architecture of rural Japanese villages in mountainous regions. Like these Japanese villages, Kakariko Village is enclosed by steep cliffs and rugged terrain. This fundamentally shapes the village's architecture and urban planning. Because you can't just flatten everything and call it a day, right? Kakariko structures must adapt to the limitations given by the uneven topography, giving interesting results. The village layout follows the natural contours of the land with buildings placed strategically to avoid disruption of the environment. Because of that, the village is built in a cascading fashion with homes and pathways arranged along different elevations. I tried to see if the placement of the houses had any correlation with the social status of the inhabitants, but I couldn't find anything about it except Impa's house of course being placed on top of an isolated rock high above the rest. After the lack of correlation and the realization that it's just a video game, I went to look for other more obvious reasons for why this terraced layout was chosen. The first reason that came to mind was that it looked aesthetically pleasing, but the practical implication also appeared somewhere in my brain. Because Kakariko Village is located in the mountains, it's familiar with frequent rainfall. To ensure that rainwater drains naturally and to prevent erosion, a terraced layout was a perfect choice. There are bridges and staircases connecting these different levels, making the village feel more natural, with the many dangers existing in Hyrule like... It's understandable why the Shikai chose to hide in the mountains. The mountains offer a form of passive protection, compensating for the lack of walls in Kakariko. Settlements built within mountains benefit from the defense advantages of steep cliffs and difficult terrain, reducing their vulnerability. If you compare it to cities built in more plain environments like the Dutch city Amsterdam for instance, you see that Amsterdam needed entire fortresses and water structures to protect itself. Kakariko has no need for that because they already got protection from the location. Scattered throughout Kakariko Village are small humble tombstones, a little bit ominous but fitting nonetheless. It tells a story of the deceased, maybe the victims of a certain incident 100 years ago. Their presence suggests an interesting cultural perspective on death. Unlike the graveyards we know or the catacombs in Paris, which isolate the deceased, Kakariko's graves are more modest and unassuming, blending into the landscape rather than standing apart from it. The dead are integrated with the surroundings. These graves not only serve as a resting place, but also as a site of quiet reflection. These tombstones are just simple stone constructions, and with that mirroring the architectural philosophy of Kakariko. Practical, yet meaningful. Around the entrances of Kakariko Village, we also find some kind of gateway, consisting of 2 sticks and some ribbons. After some in-depth investigation, in other words searching on Google for 2 minutes, I found some things that heavily resemble this. It's called, and I'm going to butcher this, Shimetori. These entrances are often found marking transitions between mundane and sacred spaces. They not only serve as symbolic thresholds but also as architectural elements to reinforce the village's identity. In the video I've made about the architecture of the ancient Sheikah, we saw many spiritual elements, for example in the shrines and towers. With the modern Sheikah it's no different. With the Shimitori at the entrances of Kakariko, the village becomes almost a sacred place in its entirety, as if they are protecting the entrances of the village. These gateways are simpler and more rustic than the real-life version, reflecting the humility of the village. They are constructed using wood, a material we'll see more often in the architecture of Kakariko. Its organic and adaptable character ties these gateways deeply to nature. The wood is left largely untreated, giving it an aged and weathered look. Many people see beauty in the passage of time, and sometimes they actively try to use this in the buildings. That's why sometimes you see parts of a facade made out of copper. After some time the copper will rust, giving it a bluish look. In my opinion, it's better to just maintain your building. Yeah, rusting copper and weathered wood has a unique look to it, but I want my city to be clean. Between the wooden pillars there's a rope called a shiminawa. According to its real-life use, this element signifies purification and protection, acting as a barrier against malevolent spirits. With this knowledge, we can say for sure that Kakariko Village considers itself a sacred and protected space. Placement-wise, these gates are strategically positioned at the entrances and throughout the village, marking special locations. Like how the real-world story delineates the boundary between the physical world and the domain of the gods, the gateways in Kakariko Village symbolize the transition from the ordinary to the revered. The Shimitoris in Kakariko Village share many similarities with one found in what I think is the Hiroshima Gokoku Shrine, except this one is made out of stone. With Kakariko Shimitori, they don't seem to seek dominance over the landscape, but rather try to exist as a natural extension of it. It gives the idea that this village is more than just a village. It's a shelter of memory and culture, and there are more of these symbolic structures reaching further than the traditional architecture of Kakariko Village. Among them are the plum trees, the frog statues and the goddess statue. Let's begin with the frog statue, not because of a special reason whatsoever. I just think they are funny. In many cultures, frogs are seen as symbols of good fortune, but for me it's a sign to call pest control. Their presence in the village suggests that the Chica regard them as protectors, particularly in a village nestled in a humid, mountainous region where rainfall is vital to keep the pumpkins growing. You can offer apples to these statues, causing to appear. The statues serve as charms for agricultural prosperity, ensuring that rain continues to nourish the land. In Japan, these frog statues are popular at shrines and in homes, where they are believed to bring safe returns. Many shrines feature these statues positioned near water, reinforcing the connection between earth and water with these amphibians. Similarly, the frog statues in-game are placed near roads and houses, serving as guardians ensuring safe travel. On the belly of the frogs, the Chica emblem is painted as the marketing geniuses they are. Nestled in the village lies a grove of plum trees, maintained by an elderly villager. This area, though small, holds great emotional weight. The plum tree grove stands out as an intentional landscape element, reinforcing themes of continuity, patience, and remembrance. The one tending the tree states that he has watched over them her entire life. They represent the memories of her and her ancestors. She forbids the hero from entering, highlighting the sacred and personal nature of the grove. And at the heart of Kakariko lies a goddess statue, a place where one can pray and seek blessings. While the Temple of Time had a more grander version, the one from this village is much smaller and more intimate. Rather than being isolated in a temple, the statue exists as a seamless part of the village, suggesting that spirituality is not a separate element of one's life, but an integral part of it. Through discussing the smaller structures and the intricate details, we finally understand more of this fascinating culture that's taking place in Kakariko Village. Most of the times, those smaller things will build up to support the architectural choices made in the buildings. The environment tells a story of the people, the same people that built the structures. So let us finally move to the inner part of this village. After defeating an ancient futuristic robot, scaring a woman, and reaching Impa's house, we hear the story we heard so many times before. Like you hear from Impa that you've been asleep for 100 years, all those things you've played this game before. That 100 years is really getting forced down your throat in this game. They really want to let you know that if you've been away for 100 years. It's like those YouTubers styling videos like I survived Minecraft for 100 days or I researched this for 100 hours. It's just terrible, I hate it. Nobody actually spends 100 hours, it's clickbait, it's a scam. People have better things to do in their life than spending 100 hours on a video game. You know what? I'm going to title this video something like I spent 100 hours researching Kakariko Village. Just know that the research took an hour and maybe two. I'm going to be so disappointed if this video gets more views than the one before because of a title like that. Alright, back to the game. I talked about the urban plan, Shimitori, tombstones and much more. I talked about how this impacted the culture, how it reflected the mind of the inhabitants. Did you remember any of it? No, doesn't matter. The buildings look Japanese, anyone can see that, but what Japanese is it? Does it look like Shinto architecture or more like the Minka houses? Or let's say the Gashizukuri style. The architecture of Kakariko Village doesn't abide by one style, it's more of a mix, choosing what elements fits the building in their own specific situation. See it as if the architect went to a grocery store, bought whatever they found delicious, and but when they came home they realized dinner must be made with some fish and chocolate chip cookies. Like, both of them are delicious, but throwing them together may look a bit weird. That's why Impa's house has a roof in the form that's very similar to Shinto shrines, while the rest of the building owes much to the Gashizukuri and Minka style. For someone that doesn't know anything about architecture, this may not look special, but when you are used to seeing these styles separately, it certainly looks off. To discuss which part of the building is which style exactly is something I'll let you guys do in the comments. And remember, it's the internet, so you are always correct, and the other one is always wrong. Have fun! Something remarkable about these buildings are the thatched roofs. These gabled roofs were originally used to withstand heavy snowfall in the mountainous regions of Japan. The steep slope of the roof allows snow to slide off easily, preventing the structure from collapsing under the weight of accumulated snow. The roofs in Kakariko Village are slightly curved, but this would still work. And the village now looks more Japanese than the actual rural Japanese village. My theory is that the designers chose to change the original roofs to not let the player be confused. Many would think structures built in the Gasho style are from places like Switzerland or Germany because of the shape of their roofs. An European atmosphere combined with Japanese frog statues and shimitori would be very confusing to walk around. By distorting an already existing Japanese style, the designers made the village look more Japanese. By looking at it like that, Kakariko Village feels like a postmodernist place. It's a parody of the past. The thatched roofs has many benefits, especially in a cold mountainous climate. It provides thermal insulation, keeping the buildings warm in the winter and even cool in the summer. The air pockets within the thick layers of thatch trap heat, reducing the energy costs for heating. The dense structure also absorbs sound effectively, making a thatched roof ideal for noise reduction. In a time where mineral wool didn't exist and place for sound insulation were nowhere to be found, this was an amazing method to keep your house warm and to ensure you can sleep quietly. The materials to make such a roof are also found close to you, so importing them from a different place isn't even needed. I can also talk about how thatched roofs leave a low carbon footprint and how it encourages biodiversity. But I don't think people thought about those things in that time. What I can say is that the thatched roofs offer a rustic charm to the houses. The texture and natural tones blend really well with the landscape, enhancing the aesthetic appeal. Compared to tiles like you see in Hateno Village, thatch is much lighter, reducing the structural load on buildings. That's why a wooden construction is more than enough to keep the roof stabilized. But there are also some things one must look out for. Thatched roofs have a high fire risk, meaning that one small fire is able to destroy the whole village. Modern thatched roofs are always built with fire barriers beneath the thatch and other elements to ensure the fire doesn't spread fast to the rest of the house. Another thing that one needs to keep in mind is the high maintenance requirements. Thatch deteriorates over time and requires regular maintenance, otherwise rot, moss growth and other infections can weaken the material. Below the roof we see a wooden framework. Much like the Minka houses in Japan, the structures of Kakariko Village utilizes wooden beams and posts that function as the construction of these buildings. The choice of material conveys a sense of warmth and coziness. The elevated platforms of the houses are another feature of Kakariko Village's architecture. Because of the uneven terrain, it's much easier to build the houses on a platform than to even the terrain itself. To even this stony terrain would take much work, even resulting in changing the environment for one's own benefits. And that's something that, from what we've seen before, doesn't fit in the mindset of Kakariko. The platform suggests a form of respect to the environment, making these buildings feel elevated from the earth, as if they are never meant to be there permanently. The houses don't dominate the environment but live in harmony with it. Another benefit from these platforms is that the structure is protected against the moisture of the ground. Wooden structures are particularly vulnerable to rot, and by elevating the homes, the inhabitants prevent water from seeping into the foundation. The interiors of Kakariko's houses are, if I must be honest, a little bit underwhelming. There's only one room for a bed and a table, giving a pragmatic impression. The life that's lived here is a simple life with not much going on. Some houses have ancient Sheikah markings on the wall recognizable by the twisting patterns. But it's interesting how every room has something setting it apart from the rest. There's always something there that represents the owner. Like Paya's room has plum trees for decoration, Kado, the guy that loves his chicken more than his wife, has plenty of drawings of them on his wall. What truly sets Kakariko Village apart from other settlements in Hyrule is its thoughtful integration into the landscape. The village does not seem to encroach upon its surroundings but rather works with them. The buildings of Kakariko are not isolated from nature but immersed within it. And their reverence for nature is also seen in the tombstones, frog statues and plum trees. These elements provide a sense of continuity between the built and natural environment, ensuring the village feels alive.